mobile. And oh yeah, we have to switch to English. We'll have this conversation in English today. And the panelists are Dino Esposito.
Hi, everybody.
Claudius Huber.
Hallo zusammen.
Felix Rieseberg.
Hi.
And Christian Weyer.
Hi, Dino.
Christian, I will never quarrel with you. Okay? You, as you want, as you like. You're too big for me. Good boy.
Okay, we are only discussing. Do not use any physical...
no quarrel, no fight, nothing?
No.
I hope Christian Gross will not come onto stage today. So.
It's not planned. So Christian, please stay down. Christian Weyer is afraid of you. Okay, but we want to start. We want to talk about, yeah, mobile is the main topic. But in a smaller form, we want to talk about the forms of mobile solutions, or about what the heck is an app. And we're starting with Dino. We have the idea that, yeah, the whole discussion will be separated in three major parts. And the first one is one that is started by Dino, because he has a very unique or very special insight on what he thinks an app should be. We want to try to define a little bit what an app is, what an app is not. The range is very big. But for Dino, mobile websites are a starting point to discuss this.
Yes, essentially, the point that results from 2 years, the past 2 years that I spent in this new industry after having been a guru, an expert, a god. Can I say god? Can I say God? Okay. No, Christian, is okay? Okay. The .NET guru for that many years. I started scratch from mobile, and I took mobile in a way that was essentially business-oriented and without any extra fluff being represented by technology and cool products. And I think that it's all about companies to have their own strategy. Put down in terms of acronyms, there is the popular bring your own device, BYOD, which is popular in IT, among IT people. I would like to change this slightly in a bring your own strategy. So be aware, essentially as a company, of what that mobile new channel represents for your business. And this is essentially what a company should start thinking of beyond and before focusing on a mobile app and then an iOS app, an iPhone, or maybe iPad, iPhone and iPad, and what about Android, and what about Windows, and Windows 8, and Windows 9, and Windows 10, and BlackBerry, and so forth. If you don't know exactly, as a company, in which way this new channel that cannot be ignored and cannot be denied, in which way this can help you, well, you risk seriously to just waste your money or to bring with your own well-deserved money things that are probably not necessarily a success. So, coming down to a concrete guidance, what I'm telling now to customers is essentially, in any case, you need to make sure that your existing current websites work well on a variety of classes of devices. And by classes of devices, I'm not necessarily thinking of iOS 3.2, iOS 4, iOS 5, iOS 6, Android 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, or maybe the HTC this, LG this, Lumia, Samsung, and so forth. I'm just thinking of classes of devices. And at the very minimum, a reasonable classification is based on 3 elements: smartphones, tablets, and legacy devices, and possibly other are, of course, the laptop, the classic desktop website, and possibly in the future smart TVs, or larger screens, or particularly smaller screens. But today, if you just focus on tablets, smartphones, and laptop, you are okay. So the next step in this is that the final result should be that for customers to type www.yoursite.com, and regardless of the device, they should get the content that is ideal for the device, or the content that you as the company decides that, and the services that you as a company want to deliver through that particular device. So this means that you have to probably refactor the existing websites you have today. And if you have a website that is mostly based on, I don't know, WordPress, and it's essentially a CMS with a nice piece of UI on top of that, that could probably mean, you know, doing a more significant work of re-architecting, extrapolating data, and making sure that whatever is the core of services that your website offers, they should be available through a web API. And by web API here, I mean something extremely, absolutely generic, which regardless of the physical technology that you then use to implement this. I'm just talking about endpoints accessible via HTTP that can be used to perform operations. Once you have this, and this could be a significant architectural change, you can build or rebuild or adjust the existing laptop website, optimize things for versions of the site for particular devices, but you are already well positioned for building the next step, which could really be a mobile app. So I say that it's fundamental now, as I say things, for companies to have, to be able to provide a nice, beautiful, and effective experience to all users going to the website, regardless of the device. And this is necessary. I mean, this, as I see things, is not even an option. This is a mandatory step. Without this step, you seriously risk to see your mobile business compromised. You see the effects of even having a nice iPhone app to see compromised. It's not a great picture of you that you give to your users if they have to shrink or zoom on a device to see the content that is there. And this is the first step. The second step.
Maybe we should give the other panelists a chance to intervene, because you gave an overall aspect now. And yeah, discussing the problem of shrinking websites or making them bigger on the smaller devices, we may ask Thomas what he's thinking about the differences between these website concept and the apps.
I think it differs if you think about building a website for different devices, and the user, when he browses to a website, he doesn't expect the website to look, for example, especially on Android, to look like an Android app, because he is aware it's a website and it's a web application. And if you make a native app that's in the store, for example, the user really expects on iOS, it looks like an iOS application. On Android, it looks like Android application, and so on. For example, when I check my bank account, the bank website, it's displayed really with the special menu items I need to check it, and it's optimized to my Android, but it looks the same way on iPhone, on Android, on Windows Phone, and I don't expect that it has a native look in this case. And I think you need to differ if you want to have this native look or if you don't want to have it.
Okay. Felix.
Well, I think in general, just keeping data and views apart is not specifically new, and we should have done that for many, many years. And I just want to say WordPress here. WordPress has been doing that for quite some time. WordPress has a very extensive API that, by the way, is running blazingly fast on pretty much any environment. So, yeah, I totally agree. You should keep data apart from views, and WordPress would actually be a good way of doing that.
I actually also totally agree to what Dino said, but in his Italian style, it took a little bit longer to explain it. You could have just said it in 2 sentences. No, I'm kidding. Okay, no, of course it's very important to have an overall architecture which points onto our second bullet of the keynote. I just want to answer to what Thomas Claudius said. I'm not sure that I always want to have an app, a real app, so a native app that I can get, for example, through the App Store, to look like an iPhone app on the iPhone and an Android app on the Android, because maybe it's a corporate identity feature of my app that it looks like my app, like my company's app, like the brand and the stamp and the logo of my company on each and every device and each and every platform. So I'm with you that usually if we have something like more data-driven forms over data-style applications, that maybe if I open those ones, I want to have a look and feel of the iPhone device platform and or the Android or Windows Phone. But what I actually see is kind of a spectrum. So it's not websites or apps, it's actually a spectrum where we can flow from a pure website with all the restrictions and all the major points that Dino explained onto a real app. So for example, on Android and on iOS, we have this concept of a home screen app. That means if we navigate to a website in Safari, for example on iOS, and I say add that to the home screen, then I get a nice icon. If the website provides me with a custom icon, then this icon is placed onto my home screen. And then if I start that app, it's not actually started in the actual Safari browser, but it is a special lightweight version of the Safari browser where I then have a Chrome-less application, which is actually the website. So if we think about this spectrum from a website over a home screen app to real apps, we need to take into account a lot of architectural things and issues that we may not be aware today when we are talking about and developing desktop applications. Stuff like online-offline capabilities, stuff like caching assets and resources locally and not each and every time trying to communicate with a web server or the web APIs.
Talking about websites, it's almost clear to everybody how to do that, because we're doing that for many years now. But you were talking about a real app on the rear end of the scale. So we should discuss what a real app is maybe, and maybe the architecture. So the second point we want to talk about is a good approach to do that, because we have two aspects on apps. They look nice, they function on the device they are on. Well, hopefully they look nice, and hopefully they function. But they are connected to the backend too. So there are two different architectural approaches maybe, or aspects. We can say we have a client architecture and an overall architecture. And on the other hand, we have vast possibilities on building apps, like native apps or non-native apps or hybrid apps. Could we find a differentiation between non-native, native, and hybrid apps first, maybe on the app level? And then on the backend level, what can we do to fill up the apps to make them function in the way we want? Who wants to start, maybe? Yeah, Felix.
I would like to very much vouch for a concept where an application is defined as application as soon as it fits the application model on a single operating system. So regardless of whether you talk about iOS or Android or Windows, regardless, by the way, whether Windows 8 or Windows Phone, you do have an application model. You have something that your operating system expects from an application. To boil it down, you could say, does my application have an application object? Do I have an application object to work with? If you do, it's very likely you are an app. If you don't, it's very unlikely that you are an app. So I wouldn't actually say that it's about what kind of APIs you access, because obviously HTML5 has the ability to access all kinds of APIs today, including app cache and multi-channel. But
I have to disagree a little bit, because maybe 80%, and I'm only talking about the business applications that a lot of these guys here are going to develop, not about games and stuff like that. So 80% are the typical forms over data stuff, where I do not need to really interact with a native device, where I maybe need to do some authentication stuff, where I maybe need to do some local storage stuff, but I do not really need to follow the intrinsics of each application and application model of each and every platform. So I usually have, in 80% of all the cases that I know or that we know as consultants, I have at least a common denominator to use.
Yeah. I think that we developers have different meaning of what is an app than the user. Because if the user, for example, if he pins the website to his home screen and he clicks on it, for him it feels like an app. And so maybe the user doesn't care if we have an app object behind the scenes or something. So he has a total different meaning than we have what we feel an app is. So for example, on the Windows Phone, we expect we have our application object and we do it maybe native, it's a real app, else it's a website. But for the user, maybe it's not the same case.
There is a big difference, though, for the user. On all platforms, by the way, there's a huge difference. So even on Windows 8, you can actually pin an application, a website, as an application, and you can even send notifications. You can actually make it look exactly like an application. In difference, though, let's just take iOS for a moment here. Apple promises its users that it's backing up application data. How is that working with your pinned website? Not so great. That is not working too great with my Windows 8 app. If it's a pinned website, that is not actually an app. That doesn't really fulfill all the promises that are made to the user, what an application is supposed to do and how it actually integrates into the life cycle. Take other things like synchronization of user data. That is something Windows 8 can do. If you have multiple devices, application data is synced. If I have a website, especially a data website, let's say I have authentication and I need to authenticate a user. I'm putting in password, name, and I have a couple of things on that side. I kind of would expect the same data to be on my other device, because that is like the big premise of the new platform. That is the big premise of the cloud. That won't work with a website unless I actually try to integrate all the features that the application model is giving me using a backend. But then you're just trying to replicate features that the operating system is offering you anyway.
If you need all these features which the application models or the respective application model offers you, then I'm fine. But I'm not sure that I always want or need those features, those vast features, which are cool and awesome, but maybe I don't need them.
Given the distinction I was talking about, native apps, non-native apps, and hybrid apps, maybe Dino, could you can give us a concise sketch on what an architectural approach would be, or what thought should be behind before the developers here start to program an app, how to decide which would be a nice approach or the best approach for their purpose?
I think that when we think of hybrid apps, I think that the most effective way to understand the concept is starting from a small quote from the Apple documentation for the WebView component they have on iOS, and there are similar components on Android as well as Windows Phone. The WebView is the classic web browser object that we started using back at the time of VB4, VB5, the beginning of the modern computing era. Anyway, they say that the WebView is expected to be the tool through which you integrate in the application's user interface any content that, for whatever reason, is better rendered through HTML. An interesting aspect of the WebView components you find on all platforms, including Windows Phone and Android, is the ability for you to pass information, content to display to this WebView component through a URL, an external URL, but also through a string. So that means that you can prepare an HTML string locally using the in-device logic and then display HTML there. Okay. This said, an hybrid application is essentially a combination of native code and native user interface and this special windows represented by the WebView that can take content that possibly comes from the local storage, is calculated dynamically, or is downloaded from in the form of a JSON, or directly in the form of ready-made HTML from an external website. Now, this is the approach that many of you may know or may recognize from your knowledge of a popular platform like PhoneGap. PhoneGap is great and became popular because it tells you, you write a website, client side, so no ASP.NET, just plain HTML, plain JavaScript, and plain CSS, and you can use whatever tool you like, including Visual Studio, especially Visual Studio, to write those pages, essentially, linked together. And once you are ready, so once you are satisfied with your job, oh, wow, this rocks, you take these individual files and you build an iOS, Android, Windows Phone, and there are up to 7 different mobile platforms supported, including Symbian, WebOS, and Samsung Bada. You create a different project, and then you import in this project the HTML files, the JS and CSS files as resources. And then the PhoneGap project template contains essentially an Hello World app, which is just based on a starter class. You slightly modify the starter class to force the app to, be driven by the behavior of a PhoneGap root window object. And all that this root window object does is loading into a full screen web view the site from the application resources. So in the end, with PhoneGap, you can have a fully native application that you can deploy to the App Store and download from the App Store, but has been written using HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and most of the time, the same code base, HTML code base, works across platforms.
Plus, there is a vast JavaScript-based API. So with the recent release of, well, it's not only called PhoneGap, but also Cordova, which is the original Adobe project. So with the recent release of PhoneGap 2.0, they have a unified JavaScript API where you can access local storage, you can access the accelerometer, and several other native device-specific features, right? So in one sentence, a native app is an app that you write against the native application model and the native application APIs. Like on the Windows Phone 7, you use, well, C#, VB, and SAML. On iOS, you use Objective-C and the Xcode environment. On Android, you use Java and maybe Eclipse or an IDE of your choice. And a hybrid app is exactly what Dino said. You have a native shell, and whether you write that shell on your own, right? Or you use a pre-manufactured toolkit like PhoneGap, that's a totally different discussion. But a hybrid app has a native shell, and inside of that shell, again, for my 80-20 scenarios, for the forms over data scenarios, you have just HTML and JavaScript and your images and your CSS, and you're done. If you visited my session yesterday in the morning where I showed this nice-looking to-do application where I communicated to Web API on the server. This is actually exactly how we are building today a lot of applications for our customers. We are using a mobile-optimized toolkit, which does the CSS rendering and all the nice stuff for Android and for iOS, and hopefully also in the future for Windows Phone 8, we will see. And then we just test this locally in a web browser which is compatible, which means Chrome or Safari these days. And then if we are done with testing and everything is fine, we are going into a PhoneGap project and pour the contents into PhoneGap and then build the actual native application for the native devices.
Thomas, does this decision of a developer for a native, non-native, or hybrid app has any consequences for the way he's building the UX?
Of course, if you look at it from a point of a UI developer, you prefer the native development because you have much more possibilities than doing it in HTML5.
And fast and fluid.
And yes, you can do it fast and fluid, right, like Christian mentioned. And I think the architecture should be built that you are able, if you have, for example, a service architecture, let's say just a web API, that you are able to build native for Windows Phone. If you have really scenarios where you have UI expensive tasks to do that are not possible or hard possible, and then you can build it native for Windows Phone, for iOS, and maybe you can do a very thin HTML5 application for all other devices that uses the same services but has not the same experience than in the native stuff.
One thing I'd like to say, being very good friends with the guys at Adobe who do PhoneGap and do a brilliant job, is that PhoneGap alone is not a way to be. It's not a ticket to be lazy. Okay, it's not a tool that allows you to be lazy and just don't care. That is not the point of PhoneGap. PhoneGap is a very, very powerful toolkit for the guys who really enjoy JavaScript, HTML5, and know how to do magic with those tools. And you can see it with applications like, I think Wikipedia for Android is written in PhoneGap, but it's actually not published on any other platform like it is on Android, mostly because it's a very good app, but it's a very good app on Android. And for instance, looking from my Microsoft perspective, we very much agree with Apple that a great iPad app is pretty damn sure to be a very shitty Windows 8 app, and vice versa. So you have to consider that different devices are still going to be around, and different environments are still going to be around. And actually, PhoneGap has a very nice API that tells you exactly what environment you're running in. And I think at least for the major platforms, CSS and HTML5 is giving you the opportunities of at least caring, in a very small way about whether you're displayed on Windows, iOS, or Android. And I think you should totally do that. It's not a ticket to be lazy.
Mm-hmm. Felix, you were talking about good and great apps. There are quality aspects of an app. And we want to talk about the success factors of an app. Taking into account, what are the success factors? We are talking about user experience. Then Thomas made a decision between a business app and a consumer app, maybe. And Dino mentioned the business benefit also of an app. So what are the success factors of an app? Because building a great app is not really useful when nobody uses it then.
Yeah, go and build great apps. So I think one big trend we have to see is that you're not really allowed anymore to make a big difference between business applications and consumer applications. Mm-hmm. I know that it's something we all like to do, and if I walk around, for instance, if I'm on any given train station and then look at the applications the poor guys working there have to use, you can just literally see them dying. That is something that will go away in the future, especially if you consider that we have the whole bring your own device thing. And I know it sounds harsh, but CEOs today totally expect their CRM system to be as useful and as much fun as Facebook. It sounds harsh, but that's actually the case. As long as Facebook is more fluid and just looks better than your CRM application, they will always consider to be a CRM application of a lesser kind, and that is not what we want to achieve. So I think if we're talking about success factors, user experience, user interface gain huge traction, especially because of consumer applications. If you just, for the fun of it, look at all old applications that have been done in the business environment, we can very much easily accept that that is not acceptable anymore today. And directly below that, obviously, comes some insight into, how the user is going to use an application in different scenarios. And I think these are things all platforms are trying to accomplish by, giving a full window, giving more focus, taking care of trends like, we say mobile so easily, but obviously, I'm not the oldest guy around, but even I had a desktop case that had it was huge, but there were some metal grips attached, basically wheeled on there, and there was a mobile desktop case and a mobile computer that just took a small car to carry around. And obviously, we have many, many of these things that just change the paradigm of how applications are used. But I think the biggest one is certainly user experience and user interface, because the rest has been around for some time.
Mm. And how do the developers have to approach this user experience aspect from their perspective?
From a developer and especially solution architect's point of view, I think you have to think mobile, and you have to think connected and disconnected. Because that's exactly how you use your application, right? You expect your application to work downstairs where there is no reception of any signal, and it should just work. So you need to think disconnected, which means you need to have something like a local storage, like a caching mechanism, and like network detection logic. You need to think local, you need to think connected when you are upstairs again and you have a broadband or a Wi-Fi connection. And of course, you need to use the value-add features that mobile platforms can give you, like notifications, whether it's device or native push notifications with a Windows notification service or the phone notification service or Apple's or Google's or whatever, or whether it's just an app-specific push notification mechanism so that you can get data in a real-time manner from your servers or services into the actual end user's devices. So we really need to rethink as the common web or desktop developers. We really need to think mobile, and I completely agree with you. I guess there will be no longer a distinction between a consumer and a business application, because we are all consumers of mobile devices and we expect the application just to work, right? And if we now have an application which is suited for the needs of my company, I just expect this application to work exactly like this. Maybe it doesn't look like cut the rope, but it should actually rock like cut the rope.
I have a little different meaning, even if I'm the UI guy. I totally agree with the application that goes out, like CRM, for example, from Microsoft. But if we have an internal application, I see it in current WPF projects, for example, the internal applications that are just used inside of the company and don't go out to their customers, and there are also mobile things they want to have, but they don't care if the application looks really shiny. They just want to have the data displayed in a good way on the mobile device, but they don't care that the UI has their corporate identity and all this stuff.
Yeah, but these guys also have Windows phones and iPhones and use any kind of application from the App Store, and they really expect it to work at least in a kind of all those other applications that they have on their phones, and not like a crappy copy of Microsoft Access on iPhone.
Totally agree to that. The way it has to work is a totally different way from the desktop way or the way we are using today. But from the UI design, just to make it look shiny, I don't think it's the same for internal and external apps, like we had before with desktop apps.
Which brings us to deployment models, right? So is the App Store, the public App Store, everything we have, or is the Apple App Store or Microsoft, how's it called, Place, Windows Phone Place, Windows Store, or Google's Play Store, I guess, right? Is this the kind of deployment mechanisms that you guys always need and want, or do you want to have some kind of enterprise-wide deployment model? So I guess the latter.
Yeah. What possibilities are there for developers? I mean, you're...
For Microsoft first.
Okay. I don't know, I don't want to bore anyone, but I can just very quickly go into enterprise sideloading, which is exactly that scenario. So people might have already heard that next to the consumer model, you can totally employ enterprise stores. That might even be somewhat too much for many companies. So here's a very simple solution. If your company is using the enterprise version of Windows and has a domain controller, so it's basically managed by any IT admin inside the company, it's automatically activated for enterprise sideloading, which basically means develop your application and just install it using command line tools, and you can actually roll that out across the company, on the side of the domain controller, including adding security policies and everything that you need to do in an enterprise context.
So you're talking about Windows 8 or phone?
I'm talking about Windows 8. I'm totally talking about Windows 8. There are some solutions for Windows Phone 7.5, which I'm not going to go into today because it's going to be somewhat obsolete in a couple of weeks. But certainly, I think we have to think about application models for enterprises, and I think sideloading, enterprise-activated sideloading is probably the best way of making sure that consumers don't constantly install all kinds of crap on the computer, and B, making sure that enterprises are allowed to develop crappy applications if they really need to.
I think what the discussion, and it's really a vast or a wide scope we are talking about, but what it shows is that for you as a developer, it's not quite that easy to say, I'm just doing an app because one of your marketing guys or your CEOs are coming and say, hey, we want an app, it's so easy, it's so shiny, it's so bunt. That was a German word, so colorful, sorry. And there are there's a lot to think about before you start to do the app, what the purpose is, what technologies you use, where you are walking.
But let me think before you start. Okay, so I think that there are essentially 3 statements to try to summarize the success factors for the mobile. Number 1, having a strategy, so know what you need as a company. So dream, okay, what would be in the ideal world the tools and the services we can expose as a company through mobile? And then once you have the list, start thinking and understanding how to implement each. For applications, which could be native apps or maybe websites, it's all about having a very good selection of use cases for the app. Very few and very well selected. Number 3, remember that Facebook was not built in a day. So simplicity is a key factor. Few things today and maybe an extra thing tomorrow. Instead of start thinking of using all possible technologies that you may have available from a given vendor to be integrated in the app, you may or may not need it. And if you are in doubt, don't use them. So keep it simple as possible. Of course, not simpler. But so it's all about having a clear strategy and a clear selection of use cases per each app and proceeding step by step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, simple and lightweight.
Agile.
Agile.
Okay.
Mobile and agile. Like
lots of buzzwords. Before Dino starts to fly, we have a little time for 2 short questions and especially 2 short answers.
So you're not going to answer?
No. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Is there any question?
Die wollen alle Mittag essen.
Yeah, you're hungry, aren't you? Okay.
You said I don't have to answer, so they don't have questions.
Yeah. I think last words of Dino were really, last word wasn't meant like that. We're summarizing the discussion very good, and I thank you very much for being here and discussing that with us. And I hope it gave you some starting points to think about the app, because whatever happens in the future, whatever the companies, the big companies doing, providing you tools for it, like Microsoft, you will be the one who has to build the app in the end of the day, because either your customers or either your bosses are coming and say, we want to have one. And then you should be prepared. And I hope, yeah, that we had the chance to give you enough insights to start building apps.
And of course, if you have questions, just walk up to us on the floor and, well, ask questions. We're happy to help you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the BASTA.
Bye.